Headed into the shop, another day on the VS4-10 Crawlmasters rig. I'm debating on whether to mount shock tabs or shock hoops or whatever you want to call it onto the chassis. At this point, I've built it so that I could just bolt on the stock Vanquish VS4-10 shock towers, and they've worked really well. You know, it's kind of how but now I'm kicking it around. I might do it just in the rear. I might leave the front as is, but I've got to make that decision, but I've got to make it soon. So I did stop and get the gunmetal wheel paint that I use for chassis. So hopefully I can get everything finish welded today. Any other things that I'm gonna add, whatever, get that put on there, get a coat of paint on it, and hopefully reassemble. Yesterday, got the Proline high racks dismounted and the new Crawler Innovations foams put in. Went with the 4.25 inch Little Nova foams from Crawler Innovation. Went with a soft outer in the front and a firm outer in the rear. I bought spray paint yesterday, but I forgot to get primer. Quick stop at Home Depot on the way. So I got here into the office. I've been playing around a little bit with looking at shock positions and where I would have to have the shock mounted at full bump in order to make sure that it still allows the suspension to function throughout the entire range of motions. In the rear, it's a little bit easier, being that it's a 4-link. I don't have to worry about the panhard or steering clearance, so I can play around with that a little bit more, get it stuffed down exactly where I want. So these decisions have to be made quickly because I've got a Chiefs game I have to go watch. So I gotta get to work. So we got this thing put back together, completely reassembled. I'm pretty happy overall, honestly. It looks good. Everything fit about how I wanted. Everything's clearing. We got the chassis finish welded, painted, or primered, painted, you know. I went in and ground the welds, or used, not really ground, but use a sanding drum. It's a sanding disc type setup, just to make sure there was no residual splatter or anything like that hanging around. Try and make it look as best as possible once it's actually painted. And I think it's good enough, so I'm happy. The interior sitting in there well. At this point, I still have the electronics to put in, which would be the ESC, which I'm going to use a Castle Mamba X. And then I've got to get the winch controller in there for the power shift winch that I've got installed up front. I don't know, not much else really, since I'm not putting a dig or anything like that in here. It's going to be a pretty straightforward install. The winch is all set. I think the only thing that I need to do is I need to unspool the winch completely and then re-spool it the opposite way on the drum, just to get myself a little bit better pull from the winch position through the bumper and out. That should be a pretty simple deal though, once I've got everything wired and in there. One thing that I did get accomplished today was the new forward battery mount. Now, since this is going to be basically a competition style rig, or something that I'm going to use for competition, so trying to keep it fairly oriented that way, even if I did add a bunch of extra weight and tubing. But I've made a really low slung battery mount here that goes in front of the transmission, behind the servos, and super low. This is a 4S 1300 pack. Now, that gets it as low as I can. Since the front axle is offset, the drive shaft is way out of the way. The only thing I have to dodge is the front upper link. I am going to make a few little modifications to this mount, just to make sure everything is going to hold up well through the abuse of actually crawling and beating on it. But other than that, I'm really happy with where it's at. It's going to keep the weight nice, low, and forward. Also, I did swap from 350 hubs to 225s all the way around on all the wheels, except in the front I added stainless steel 1.9 brake weights. So that took me back to the width of a 350 hub in the front, but added a little bit of forward weight. It definitely just has a good forward weight bias, and once I install the ESC, I'm probably going to try and keep it up here in the front as well, just to keep all of the weight forward, just to try and make sure that the balance is as forward as possible, offsetting the weight that I added to the rear. I did add body nuts to the rear to keep the body together. I've drilled the body to hold everything in place, and it does that pretty well. Now, since I did add rear shock hoops and shock mounts, I laid the shocks forward more, so there's more travel in the rear. It will move further, it goes down further, and because of that, it does start to rub on the lip of these rear fenders a little bit. So I'm going to go through and cut off the outside lip of that completely, just to make sure that it moves out of the way easy, doesn't rub too badly. The front, I left the front bolt-on shock towers, and I'm actually really happy with those. They clear, and I built the whole front tubing to work around the body post positions that, you know, are used on those. So at this point, I think they're going to work fine. I am going to use body posts on the front of this, just because I want the body to be secure on there. So I didn't build metal sliders now. The 3D printed ones will work for the time being. So that's kind of the end of the fabrication on this. So I'll still do some updates, wiring, planning, and, you know, detailing. I do still want to figure out a fuel cell in the rear. Probably not going to do a radiator, just going to keep it simple. I also added a brace in between the front, you know, bars that I added. I think it just looked cool. It was for fun. And then the real decision making will be after Crawlmasters, when I either make the decision to keep the tires, go to big tires, or sell the rig. We've got a few weeks before that decision happens, and we'll just see if I actually like the tiny tires or not. Now that I've got everything assembled, you can see that front approach angle is actually pretty good. It's almost vertical, just a little bit off, so probably not quite 90 degrees, but damn close. In the rear, it's almost at the center line of the axle. So I did do a lot of sanding on the front, since I plated that front tube with that 24 gauge, and I put a lot of filler around there, just because with how thin it was, I needed to bleed it in there and make sure that it was covered. And then I went in and kind of blended that as much as possible, try and make it look as seamless as I could. It's been a while since I built a truck like this, and I can't express how much fun I had doing it again. So definitely hoping to find the time to keep doing this type of thing, because it was a ton of fun. And it was even more fun because you guys had great comments on all of the videos. I really appreciate that more than anything. Definitely one of the biggest reasons why I like to do these videos. So thanks again for all of your guys' comments. That means a lot to me. But with that said, that's going to do it for this one. Like the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're not already. Hit the notification bell so you see them as soon as they pop up. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.